America's shadow government. Is it affecting you personally? That's the topic of today's Bold and Blunt, and I'm your host, Cheryl Chumley, giving you a Christian conservative look at today's news, politics, culture, and events. Listen to this headline from ABC News from April of 2017. Nearly half of Americans think there's a deep state, according to a poll. That's 2017, and guess what? The numbers have stayed about the same. Americans, by and large, don't trust their government. And on one hand, that's good. A healthy distrust of government helps keep America free. We have to question our politicians. We have to question our governing authorities. We have to hold them accountable. And the only way to do that is to regard government and their actions and their statements with a certain level of healthy skepticism, maybe even cynicism. Really, we have to fall on the side of not trusting government and putting them, government, politicians, our elected leaders, in the position of proving to us, the taxpayers who pay their salaries, proving to us that they are justified in doing what they want to do. Government starts with the people. It's a ground up type of deal in America, not top down. But at the same time, the idea of a deep state, a shadow government plaguing American citizens, being weaponized against American citizens, against you and me, that's a disgusting reality of modern day politics. And how do we switch that? How do we go about getting back to the time where government was open and transparent? Remember, Barack Obama promised us the most open, transparent government in the world. He wasn't really as open and transparent as all that. Remember, he was the one that weaponized the Justice Department to do some secret spying on America's media, right? So what do we do? What do we do about this? And before I get into more of that, I want to quickly mention, if you like Bold and Blunt, you may get Bold and Blunt at edify.app, at washingtontimes.com, at Real Life Network, and wherever podcasts are offered. And if you do go to washingtontimes.com, make sure and sign up for my newsletter there. Scroll to the bottom of the page to the newsletter section, click on it, and find Bold and Blunt with Cheryl Chumley. That's my newsletter. Comes out Monday, Wednesday, and Friday. Delivered to your email box. Contains my commentaries that I write at the Washington Times all day long, all week long, as well as my Tuesday and Thursday, twice weekly Bold and Blunt podcasts. QAnon. This is a headline from Business Insider. QAnon, 1 in 3 Americans believe myth of a deep state. That was December 30th, 2020. And basically this piece was aimed at slamming Donald Trump supporters. Here are the bullet points from it. An NPR Ipsos poll found that 39% believe that a deep state is working against President Donald Trump. A majority of Republicans believe in the deep state, conspiracy theory. I love how they word that, right? Republicans, deep state, conspiracy theory. They couldn't just say deep state theory or deep state ideals. All a deep state is, all a deep state form of government is, or a shadow government, is a group of people working behind the scenes to exert their wills in government on politicians. It's not out in left field. It's not, tinfoil hat thinking to believe that there are people behind the scenes of what you see in the public exerting their wills. It's just human nature, for crying out loud. Work in an office, and you see people behind the scenes whispering in the ears of those who have influence. Work anywhere in life, and that's how it is. There are always people behind the scenes that you don't know about or see that are exerting their wills to bring about an agenda that maybe is different from what the open, publicly stated agenda or mission is. Back to Business Insider. 40% of Americans believe that China invented COVID-19 in a lab, despite this having been disproven. Well, was it disproven? It seems to me maybe Business Insider is working a little deep state here. Americans are worried about the spread of disinformation, the poll found. Well, Americans should be worried about the spread of disinformation, especially under the years of COVID, because under COVID, pretty much everything that the government was putting out in terms of a narrative and message and best medical health practices and so forth has been and continues to be proven inaccurate. I mean, where's the safety about the shots? Don't even call them vaccines anymore. They had to change the definition of vaccines in order to call the COVID shots vaccines. What is it, something like 0.3%? Actually, I think it's maybe just under 3% of Americans have taken this latest booster, this latest COVID booster. Why? Because people are dying from the shot. People are dying, and young men are getting myocarditis, heart issues, and there's blood clots, and there are all these health issues going on with the shots that we were told by our government bureaucrats, by our so-called government experts, Anthony Fauci, by our Microsoft developers, Bill Gates, because nobody knows best medical health practice like Bill Gates, right? But we were told by all these people that the shots are safe. If you take the shots, you won't get COVID. If you take the shots, you won't spread COVID. Joe Biden himself said that after getting the shot and testing positive for COVID, and then getting another shot and testing positive for COVID. He and his wife and his White House officials and Peppermint Patty, like Dan Bongino calls Jen Psaki, right? When she was in the White House, they all had shots, tested positive for COVID, and yet continued to sell the narrative that if you get the shots, you won't get COVID. You won't spread COVID. And then when that became a narrative that was just too blatant a lie to continue to sell, then it morphed into if you get the shots, you won't get as sick with COVID as you would have without the shot. And you won't spread COVID as far and wide as you would have spread COVID if you hadn't gotten the shot, which I don't even know how you measure that. I don't know how you measure somebody getting a COVID shot and they get sick, and then you have the actual nerve to tell them, well, thankfully you got this shot that was supposed to have kept you from getting sick, but it didn't do that, but it kept you from getting as sick as you would have gotten sick had you not gotten the shot. It's unbelievable. So you have things like December 30th, 2020, the headline from Ipsos, more than 1 in 3 Americans believe a quote unquote deep state is working to undermine Trump. Well, yeah, because Trump was the one that didn't want the mandates for the shots, right? And Trump is the one that believed in America First policies, and Trump is the one that dared to defy the globalists who had been steamrolling along under Barack Obama, bringing their left-wing, communist, Marxist, collectivist, globalist agenda to America's soil under Barack Obama for 8 years. And then all of a sudden, all that got put to immediate halt under Donald Trump. And because he dared to not just campaign on America First, not just slap that on bumper stickers and leave it at that, but actually govern with America First in mind, then all Donald Trump supporters became conspiracy theorists and nut jobs and dangers to American freedoms and so forth. And then you have the media happily doing the bidding of the left wings in government to call out the MAGA types as unpatriotic, as dangerous to America, and so forth, and to slam MAGA types who dared to believe that there are forces at work behind the scenes in America's government who would love to tear down America's constitutional system. Poll, majority believe Deep state manipulates U.S. policies. That was from a survey that came out in March of 2018, reported by Politico. It was according to a Monmouth, is that how you say it? Monmouth poll. Of the 803 adults polled, 27% said they believe an unelected group known as the Deep State definitely exists. An additional 47% said it probably exists. 16% it probably does not exist, and 5% said they believe it definitely does not exist. That 5% is, of course, affectionately known as the sheep within the Democrat Party. So I have a guest today who has really written in depth on this very issue. His name is John Mills. He is retired colonel and former director, cybersecurity policy, strategy, and international affairs for the Office of the Secretary of Defense. And in his new book, War Against the Deep State, he explains how a shadow government is busily surveilling American citizens, yes, that means you and me, and suggests that we might want to pay a little bit more attention to this shadow government, this deep state type government, if we want to keep freedom for the foreseeable future in America. John Mills, thank you so much for being back on Bold and Blunt. It is great to have you here.
Thank you so much for having me back on.
Of course. You know, when I saw the title of your new book just came out, War Against the Deep State, I had to have you back on because look at what is happening with Donald Trump right now, for crying out loud. You know, he warned us about the deep state during campaign season 2015, 2016, but it really hasn't gone away, has it?
No, it hasn't. And I think Charles McGonigal, former director of counterintelligence, FBI field office, New York, the arrest of, he was the basis for the Trump, Russia scam. And now he's been arrested. But he was the person who was feeding, when I was in government, feeding us this lie, and this was a deep state operative.
So tell me why you wrote your book, and what are some of the alarming findings?
Well, the book goes through the foundations of the mass surveillance program that was set up in 2007 to 2014, and I was part of the interagency team that set this up. And it was done lawfully and for the purposes of protecting the American people from the foreign threat. But it clearly has been turned around, pointed at the American people, and weaponized, and really is the glue that holds the unlawful fourth, fifth, and sixth branches of government together.
And when you say the unlawful fourth, fifth, and sixth branches, what's your reference there?
Well, we've developed this shadow government. The fourth is the administrative state, kind of based upon the 1946 Administrative Procedures Act, where law flows into regulation. The fifth branch of government is the coming together and collusion of federal law enforcement, federal intelligence, and big tech, leveraging this mass surveillance. And then the six are the out-of-control nonprofits, such as the UPenn Biden Center, these ginormous nonprofits that hold immense sway over development of policy in the U.S. government.
Are Americans aware of this, or is this something that we don't even know what's going on, where the influence comes from?
Well, that's why I was trying to define the structure of the deep state as it's evolved. And yeah, I don't think enough attention. We're aware of the malfeasance of these groups. In the fourth administrative state, obviously the EPA, Environmental Protection Agency, ATF are poster children for bad behavior. In the fifth government, we have an incredibly important case, Missouri and Louisiana going to the Supreme Court in the spring. And that's unlawful surveillance, targeting, and censoring Elvis Chan, Laura Demo out of the FBI. This was a program I helped set up many years ago, but it really spun out of control. And so we really must have accountability. And then the sixth branch again, the UPenn Biden Center, Tony Blinken ran the greatest interference operation in history with this 51 intel officer letter. So this is just, we need more and more focus, more and more education. But the Missouri and Louisiana case is critical and will determine the fate of our constitutional republic.
Okay, so talk a little bit more about the Supreme Court case that you referenced, what people need to know in a layman's perspective, why it matters, and if we don't win on this case, what it means for the future of America.
Well, yeah, this case is the Attorney Generals of Missouri and Louisiana have brought up against big tech targeting American citizens. I'm one of them. I'm one of them that has been targeted, and this is the FBI agent Elvis Chan and his supervisor Laura Demo and others in the Foreign Influence Task Force that was created by a September 2018 executive order signed by Trump. I was out of office at this time, but as I studied this executive order, I feel in many ways the National Security Council, deep staters in the National Security Council, and the FBI and DOJ tricked Donald J. Trump into signing that executive order because it set up the Foreign Influence Task Force, whereas anybody who might question, because it was foreign interference in American elections, so that anybody questioning the election would automatically be subject to monitoring because they obviously must be under the influence of a foreign power if they're questioning. I think this whole, because you always have to have a legal basis for these actions. And the other thing is the 2013 Smith-Moon update law, where a Cold War law where American government produced information could only be projected toward foreign audiences. In 2013, everybody says, well, why can't we just repurpose it and face it toward the American people? That became the basis for, hey, if you question the COVID narrative of where it came from, if you question the vaccine and all this government-produced information, obviously, and then connect it with that executive order, obviously you must be under foreign influence. Thus, it's okay to monitor, silence, and censor you. That says we need to see the source documents of why the government was doing what it's doing. And I feel pretty strongly those two events, 2013 Smith update, the September 2018 executive order, led to the mass surveillance. And this is all what's going to be looked at by the Supreme Court in the spring.
Are you suggesting that anybody out there, including myself, right? You just mentioned that you were under surveillance, but I'm curious that anybody out there who publicly questioned the coronavirus narrative that the government wanted put out, that they became subject to and target of government surveillance?
Well, that's what it certainly appears, absent a full transparency of the U.S. government. When you do an operation like this, one of the first things you literally have on the action memo up front on the first page of the document are your legal citations, why you're doing what you're doing. And we need to see those exposed. We need to see, okay, DOJ, what possible world and what in the world do you think is the legal basis for you spying, silencing, censoring, giving lists of Americans to big tech? Where in the world did you come up with this? And so we've got to know that. And this is the deep state out of control. They're just saying, well, because this, 2013 Smith-Moon government-derived and created information, somebody's questioning it, thus they must be under the influence of foreign powers, thus it's okay to surveil, silence, target, censor them. This is bad stuff. Bad stuff.
So how would you know if you were among the targets of the deep state for coronavirus tied surveillance? Would it simply be that you were thrown off social media, or big tech stepped in and censored you in some way because you said big tech, social media was tied to this endeavor as well? Or are there other ways you would know?
Well, so to document it with specificity and accuracy, so Matt Taibbi has some of the Twitter dumps and Twitter leaks.
Yes.
Has released a list of names where essentially third-party groups have gone through and documented the technical forensics of names on social media. And this is just in one example, just one, from November, December of 2016, those who, 2020, November, December 2020, who said anything on media, and there's a list of names, the top 10,000. I'm on that list, number 862. I'll get you the list, Cheryl. We can look you up.
Yes, please.
Just one.
Geez, so this is of Donald Trump's doing, right? Which I agree with you. He was duped into it. Like many Republicans, we have the whole Patriot Act that was pushed by Republicans that resulted in a couple of sections that allowed for spying on American citizens. And Republicans sort of fall into this trap of we have to do things that sort of cross constitutional and privacy boundaries because it's for the safety and security of Americans. Don't you think that's a dangerous sort of narrative that is being abused of late?
Yeah, well, see, I've been involved in several things that initially they seemed like a good idea. Initially we had what we thought was clear legal foundation. But what can possibly go wrong here? So I think we need to constantly review and update. And the Patriot Act, we have to get a lot deeper and more detailed. People will just bring up the Patriot Act and go, good thing, or Patriot Act, bad thing. That's exactly what is good or bad about it. The Mass Surveillance Foundation set up by the Patriot Act, which led to the program that I worked, we need to revisit that. And this is the problem with once people are elected, the legislative branch, and a lot of this is overseen by the House Permanent Select Committee on Intelligence and the Senate Select Committee on Intelligence. These members, and they can be possibly mega, but it gets intoxicating with the ability to, when you are shown behind the curtain, the collection capabilities. I've seen it over and over and over again. People say, "You're kidding me. We can do this? You bet I want this." And it becomes, hold on a second here. Just because somebody wants it, a policymaker, somebody in the executive branch, somebody in the legislative branch, and in many ways the judicial branch is just a patsy and just lets approves these things without question. The FISA court has almost never denied a request. We got to question the absolute intoxicating nature of this information, because I've seen it over and over again. When people are briefed on this, they just a big grin, smile, and a head nod. I want it. I like it. I love it. I want more of it. And wow, that doesn't mean we always have to operate in accordance with law. And everybody will, the deep staters will lecture us. We're a nation of laws. Yeah, absolutely. I agree with that. We absolutely are a nation of laws, and we're gonna follow the law. So we can't just become addicted to mass surveillance because it's intoxicating. Is it legal? Is there a proper legal foundation? And just because we might, we've had plenty of laws that at one time said it was okay to do this or that, but in hindsight, they were not morally the correct thing, and that's what we have to address now.
Right. Because we are a nation of laws, right? And maybe some of these things are legal, but at the same time, we're a nation of individual liberties. And really, that always has to dominate discussions, I think. I think that we should always start with the Constitution and individual liberties and privacies and go from there. But as far as what else you have found, and I know we only have a couple minutes left, but in your war against the deep state, what are the solutions? I know you just described one very intelligent and needful idea to revisit some of these programs. I think that's a great idea. But what else have you come up with?
Well, and so for most American citizens who are aware of this, concerned about this, there's a national battle, there's a local battle, and we have to do both simultaneously. And for most Americans, you and I are black belts. Cheryl, you and I are black belts at the national level. We understand these national matters, and in many ways we are on the front line of this war. But for most Americans, they need to spend 97% of their energy right where they live, making sure they have a clean county governance. And the election in Virginia was just a great example of that. I'm not being political. I'm not being partisan. I'm just making informed observations. What happened in Virginia was one approach was Youngkin and team wanted everybody to send money to a PAC. They were going to run this show, and they essentially, and the RNC, and they essentially pushed local activists out of the way. So get out of here, you Hicks and Hayseeds. We're going to handle it. Well, we got to figure that out. That's the Virginia case, but we're so close to D.C., this always happens. But we got to make sure we have clean counties in Virginia, because in the end, what happened, it looks like, I guess there's now a seat back in play in the Senate, which may make it 50-50, 20 on each side, a tie broken by Lieutenant Governor. But we really, I think, squandered opportunities here. But we have to make sure local activists dominate their election board, county council, school board, right in the church we go to. Ed Mario Beckles run for the school board. A wonderful man, was praying, hoping he wasn't even close. We have to ensure election integrity here in our county. We have to hold the registrar accountable, and we have to do this separate from a political. We do this and say, "Man, I'm a member of the GOP." No. We do this for election integrity, because election integrity is the right thing. Doesn't matter which party.
Yep.
But also we have to have clean sheriffs, judges, and prosecutors.
That is such an important point about going local, because I can't tell you, I spent years and years in local media, right? Writing for local community newspapers. And I cannot tell you how much stuff goes through by the left, because they have paid activists going to all these small meetings that fall under the radar. The board of supervisors, city councils, architectural review boards, planning and zoning commissions. All that stuff is dominated by the left. And that's why you have trouble nowadays in your own neighborhood, even building a shed in your backyard or something like that. So you are dead right on calling for more emphasis on locals. John Mills, War Against the Deep State. You're going to have to come back on and discuss more of this, because I think we're just touching the surface. But right now, where can people get your book besides Amazon?
Signed copies are on Lindell, my store, so you can get autographed copies of War Against the Deep State, and also my previous book, The Nation Will Follow, on the Lindell store. Get autographed copies there. And then also, we try to stay off of big tech and things, but so many people are still conditioned to go to Amazon. We have it available both places. Yep,
so important, such an important book. John Mills, thank you so much for being on Bold and Blunt. Come back so we can discuss more of this, especially going into the 2024 elections. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Cheryl. Always an honor to be on your show.
And that's another Bold and Blunt. If you like Bold and Blunt, don't forget you may get Bold and Blunt at WashingtonTimes.com, at Edify.app, at Real Life Network, and wherever podcasts are offered. Tune in next time, and in the meanwhile, don't forget, stay blunt, stay bold.